But on a normal working day, there's about 1,000 trucks a week come through here full of logs.
Wow.
So you'll notice some of the roads are a bit bumpy. That's because they're 44-ton to 60-ton trucks. And when they stop, the tar seal keeps moving forward. But the council do a good job of keeping the roads, actually. But it's all man-planted forestry. It's not our native bush. We've got some of the, obviously, some of you have come down from Taupo. You would have seen a fair amount of radiata pine on the way. The interesting thing they do with that is they prune the branches off it as it grows, so that all of the rings that grow on the outside of where they've pruned is not free. That is where the money is, because they send it over to Asia. They will use it like a razor blade and shave around the outside of the log and just take a very thin veneer. It's not free, and they put that on the front of kitchen cupboards and so on. So when we buy it back, it's about 12,000 times the price. But because it grows so quickly here, you can invest for your next generation. If you put an investment in, of course, it harvests when your children are getting to the point where they're having children. And of course, all they need to do is re-sow. After they've harvested the crop, they get the cash, and then it's there for the next generation. So it's actually a very useful investment. If you go into hardwoods, it's for your grandchildren, it's not for your children. So you leave it for generation skip each time. There were 2 rivers that ran through our farm. 1,000 acres is a backyard. Pretty much you could do anything you like. The 3 boys, it was pretty rough though. We actually were banned from being in the house during daylight hours unless we were having meals, because we used to just break too many things. But of course my father worked hard on the farm, but when work permitted, he would love racing and sailing. So you'd come in here and get on one of his friends' racing boats, go out sailing. He took us along the first couple of times till he found out just how bad 3 farm boys are in a confined space and how we broke things. So he used to leave us to our own devices around the port here the day he was out sailing. Of course, for 3 boys, that is just perfect. We used to throw each other in and get fish for the morning, and then in the afternoon just look for ways to get into trouble. We argued over most things. I mean, we all knew we were going to try and borrow a boat without permission. It was just a matter of how. We spent most of our wages that we earned on the farm and paying for things that we damaged in here. But it was a fantastic childhood. We used to get paid 20 cents an hour working on the farm, so, you know, it took us a while to become millionaires. Now, just coming back to the types of work we have here, obviously those that don't head off to university stay often working in the horticultural and agricultural sectors of Hawke's Bay. A lot of them used to only work 5 or 6 months of the year because that's all the seasonal work was available. The likes of Heinz Watties and McCain's have come in and changed all that. They're the ones where you go to the freezer in the supermarket and they've got bagged vegetables, or in the canned aisle you've got all the fruit and vegetables in cans. They're moving their plants out of Tasmania and from other places around the world to Hawke's Bay because of the fact that they can get a spring, a summer and an autumn crop off the same piece of land. They can, not only that, because the crops ripen at very specific times around Hawke's Bay, they can plant crops and actually keep the combine harvesters running and still get to that crop before it's past its peak of harvest. So they keep the combine harvesters running here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 8 or 9 weeks at a time often, and then they go back and do the second rotation or the summer rotation and then the autumn. So it's a fantastic way for them to actually have the economies of scale, and the tonnage they get off the land here per acre or hectare is phenomenal. So it's very good for them. But our seasonal workers, of course, now get 8 or 9 months of work a year, and those that work in the factories get a full 12 months a year. So it's been good for our economy there. But we don't still have enough people to harvest our crops. There's still a shortage of labour in Hawke's Bay for the peak of the season. So we bring in thousands of people from the islands on a 5 or a 6 month contract. They come in here and they can earn almost an annual wage equivalent to back home. So they take that money back to their economy, which is good for them, and we can harvest our crops, which is great for us. To give you an idea of the tonnages we're involved, potatoes, when you turn them into chips or fries, well, it's not even one of the top 20 things we grow here, potatoes, but when they turn them into chips or fries, at any one time in the storage sheds here, just for one producer, there will be over 2,500 tonnes. That's 2,500 tonnes of chips or fries ready to go to Australia, because they're now our biggest trading partner, and we send a lot of things for the supermarkets over there. And a lot of people would say, obviously, the seasonal workers are unskilled, but if you spend a few days out in the orchards or the vineyards, or driving the machinery around that they use to harvest all of the crops or sow them, there's actually quite a lot of skill involved, and the more time you spend out there, the more you find how difficult and how skilled it is. And it is hard work. The amount you need to pick to make good money picking fruit and apples and so on is very, very tiring. Everything we do here has to always bear in mind that we're going to often have higher transport costs to market because we're further away. And we're often going to have higher than labour costs compared to our competitors. Our minimum hourly rate here is equivalent to some of the daily rates they have to pay in other countries. So if we do the same as our competition, we will go broke very quickly. So we have to come up with better processes and ways of processing our produce so that we can do it cheaper, or do a value add and make the product have an attribute or have it in a way that nobody else can do it, so therefore we can charge more for it. Wool used to own New Zealand 80% of its revenue. It's now just a byproduct. And so let's have a look at this factory, and I'll sort of show you what they're having to do to make sure that they keep ahead of their competition. Now Hawke's Bay breaks down into sort of different classes of topography really. The steep country's got the radiata pine on it, the sheep and beef. And with the wool, as I was saying, it's a byproduct now. China buys 80% of our wool from our 40 million sheep. They buy 80% of the wool from Australia's 70 million sheep. And they have 170 million sheep of their own. Their flock size has increased greatly in the last few years. Almost unbelievably quickly, really. I'm not sure if they've got made in China stamped on the bottom of each one, but it seems amazing how fast they've managed to increase their numbers. So that's got the sheep and beef and the radiata pine forests on the steep country. Then the rolling country's got the dairy herds. With China and India taking on a much more of a westernised diet, we believe dairy is going to be one of our shining lights, and huge investment going into it. An average herd that's been put in today will be 1,000 head of cows milked morning and night. Then there's the Heritonga Silk Plains. That's got all the orchardists and vegetable growers on it. It's where the Heinz Waddies and the McCain's firms are and so on. Although they use land outside the Silk Plains as well. But the silk plains are river silts that are 14 and sometimes in places 17 metres deep, and they've got a natural aquifer underneath, so you basically drill a hole and pump water straight up onto your crops, and anything will grow at any time. Then there's the lagoon area here, which I'll talk about as we come around the corner a bit further, but of course when it got pushed up out of the lagoons by the earthquake, it was full of salt, and it took about 25 years for the salts to be washed out of the soil by the rains. And it's still, because it was a lagoon bottom, not as fertile as the other areas of Hawke's Bay. A lot of the organic matter had broken down. So we've put the airport on it, the industrial estate that we've just come from, and many housing estates. Crops dried off most summers. It's only a couple of inches of soil on about 6 feet of river shingle. So as soon as it stopped raining, it dried out. But of course that was until someone planted some grapes there and then made wine from it. Now it has all sorts of awards and wonderful world acclaim, and it's actually now the most expensive real estate in Hawke's Bay. So it just shows you in one lifetime it's gone from the land you couldn't give away to be the most expensive land in Hawke's Bay, just because we've found a different utilisation for it.